They thought we were the weakest species in the Orion Arm. They thought our wars were primitive, our weapons outdated, and our will to fight long dead. That's the only reason they dared take me alive. The chains around my wrists were cold, humming faintly with some alien energy that made my arms heavy. My vision was still blurred from whatever sedative they'd injected me with when they stormed the mining station. All I could see through the haze were tall, insect-like shapes moving in and out of the shadows, their sharp legs clicking against the metal floor. The Click-Tar. My name's Mason Hale. I'm not a soldier anymore, haven't been for 6 years, but even a retired soldier knows when a war has already started, especially when the enemy's first move is to kidnap you instead of just killing you. They dragged me into a chamber the size of a hangar. At the far end, a creature bigger than all the rest waited, its head crowned with bone-like ridges. It stared at me with the kind of curiosity you see in predators when they're deciding whether you're worth eating. "You are human," it said in a voice that seemed to grind in my skull rather than my ears. I didn't answer. The thing leaned forward. "Your species fights for survival. We wish to know why." I gave a bitter laugh. "Why? Because we've never been given a choice." Something about that made its mandibles twitch. I could see the smaller ones shifting uncomfortably. Maybe they'd expected begging, not sarcasm. They didn't understand. Humanity doesn't do well in cages. You lock us up, you prod us, you try to dissect our instincts, and sooner or later something breaks. Not in us, in you. It wasn't until they forced me into one of their so-called trial arenas that they started to learn. They wanted to watch me fight one of their hunting beasts, some hulking, four-eyed thing with a jaw like a steel trap. The crowd of Click-Tar warriors watched from above, clicking their claws in amusement. The beast charged, its roar shaking the ground. And in that moment, something in me snapped back into the man I used to be. I didn't dodge, I didn't run. I met it head-on, my bare hands reaching for its throat. They say the galaxy has never feared humanity, because it has never truly seen humanity. But that was the day the Click-Tar saw what happens when you corner one of us. They saw how we fight, not for glory, not for territory, but because there is no other option. And I made sure they understood it wasn't just me they needed to worry about. I tore the beast's windpipe out with my teeth. When I looked up, every one of those clicking, laughing aliens had gone silent. And that was only the first lesson. The silence after the beast fell was heavier than the humid air clinging to my skin. Blood, black, sticky alien blood, ran down my chin. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the adrenaline dump. The Click-Tar didn't move. I could feel their eyes on me, hundreds of them calculating. I spat the chunk of flesh onto the arena floor. "That your idea of a test?" I growled. My voice came out low, almost calm, which was worse for them. Calm is dangerous. Calm means you've accepted what you are about to do. The largest one, the crowned one, leaned forward over the railing, its mandibles flexing in thought. "You are more efficient than expected, human." I gave it a thin smile. "You haven't seen anything yet." 2 guards, their limbs twitching in hesitation, moved down into the arena to take me away. They kept their weapons trained on me like I might leap up and tear their heads off. And they weren't wrong. I was thinking about it. But I didn't. Not yet. They dragged me back to my cell. The walls were smooth metal, cold to the touch, no seams to pry at. A single panel in the wall dispensed food twice a day, or what passed for food among insects, a thick gray paste, bitter and sour, but enough to keep me alive. That first night, I sat on the floor in the dark, staring at the faint glow from the corridor outside. My mind went back to the Click-Tar leader's voice, not just what it said, But why it said it? They weren't just here to kill humans. They were studying us, testing us, which meant they were afraid. If they weren't afraid, they'd have spaced me the moment they boarded the station. Fear makes you curious. You want to know what you're up against. But curiosity can be a fatal weakness, especially when the subject you're studying starts studying you back. The days blurred together. They sent me into the arena 3 more times, each opponent deadlier than the last. Razor-clawed beasts, spiked monstrosities, even another prisoner from a species I didn't recognize. That last one almost got me. Big, heavy brute, 4 arms, skin like armor plating. But size means nothing if you can get inside their reach. I broke both its knees before it realized the fight was over. The Clicktar crowd didn't cheer anymore. They watched in silence now, the way farmers watch a predator they've trapped in their barn, wondering if the trap will hold. Between fights, I began to learn their patterns. Guards changed shifts every 8 hours. They walked in pairs, always carrying long, spear-like weapons that hummed faintly, probably energy-based. I counted the steps from my cell to the arena. I noted the way the floor vibrated when larger ships docked with the station. They thought I was just surviving. I was preparing. On what I guessed was my 19th day in captivity, the crowned one came to see me in person. It didn't step inside the cell. Smart move. But it stood in the doorway, looking me over like a man inspecting a weapon he wasn't sure he wanted to fire. You adapt quickly, human. I shrugged. That's what we do. Its eyes narrowed. Our history says your kind has no place among the stars. You are reckless, violent, short-lived. I smiled, leaning forward. And yet here I am, making your best fighters look like children. The mandibles twitched again. Maybe that was their version of a frown. You think your victories matter? You think they make you strong? It asked. No, I said, my voice dropping to a growl. They make you weak, because every time I win, you tell me more about how you fight, and more about how to break you. For a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the corridor lights. Then it left without another word. 3 days later, everything changed. They woke me in the middle of the night cycle, chains snapping onto my wrists. I was marched through the corridors, past sections of the station I hadn't seen before, storage bays, mechanical rooms, even what looked like a hangar full of ships shaped like sharp-edged beetles. We stopped at a room lined with monitors. A holographic map of the galaxy floated in the center, dozens of red markers scattered across the star systems. I didn't need to ask what they were. War fronts, the crowned one said, stepping into the room behind me. I turned my head. You're showing me this? Why? Its gaze was unblinking. Because you are going to help us win them. I laughed, hard, sharp. And what makes you think I'd fight for you? It leaned closer, voice dropping to something cold and surgical. Because if you do not, we will erase every trace of your species from existence, not just your colonies, your home world. The words hit me like a gut punch. Earth wasn't ready for this. The military was scattered, the fleets old and underfunded. If the Clicktar came in force, they wouldn't even need a month to wipe us off the map. I didn't answer, couldn't. I just stared at the map, my mind racing. If I agreed, I'd be a traitor. If I refused, I'd be dead, and so would billions of others. But there was a third option, one that was already forming in the back of my mind. I could play along, let them think they'd broken me, and then I could burn their empire from the inside out. They gave me a Clicktar military translator, a collar that wrapped around my neck, and somehow turned my words into their guttural language. They armed me with one of their weapons, a long staff tipped with a blade of humming energy. My first mission was to lead a squad of Clicktar soldiers into a contested outpost on the edge of their territory. The enemy, a reptilian species called the Dreth, had been holding it for weeks. We hit the outpost at dawn, the alien sun rising behind us. Clicktar tactics were predictable, a straight, overwhelming charge, no subtlety, no feints. That's why they'd been stuck in this war for decades. I changed that. We flanked. We cut their supply lines. We used the terrain to funnel them into choke points where their numbers meant nothing. By the time we reached the command center, the Dreth were in full retreat. The Clicktar soldiers stared at me like I'd just rewritten the rules of war. In a way, I had. That was the beginning of the real game. Mission after mission, I taught them how humans fought, but not everything. I gave them just enough to win battles, not wars. I made them rely on me, made them think I was the key to their victories. And all the while, I was learning their command structures, their supply chains, the location of their shipyards. They thought they were using me, but I was building a list, names, coordinates, vulnerabilities, the kind of list that could cripple an empire if it fell into the right hands. I knew the risk. One mistake, one slip, and I'd end up as a smear on a Clicktar wall. But that's the thing about humans they'll never understand. We fight hardest when the stakes are highest. The day would come when I'd use their own war against them. And when that day came, the Clicktar wouldn't just learn why they should fear humanity, the whole damn galaxy would. I'd been serving with the Clicktar for just over 3 months when I realized something important. They feared their enemies almost as much as they feared me. It wasn't obvious at first. The Clicktar carried themselves like predators, mandibles clicking in arrogance, their long limbs always coiled with a casual readiness for violence. But in the quiet moments, in the briefing rooms before deployment, or in the way they avoided talking about certain systems on the map, I could see it. They respected strength, but they feared unpredictability. And the Dreth weren't their only war. The galaxy is a messy place. Old grudges between species never die. They just shift and fester in the dark. The Clicktar were fighting 3 separate fronts. The Dreth to the north, a coalition of avian species to the east, and a nomadic raiding fleet known as the Viren in the outer rim. The Clicktar called them parasites. I called them opportunities. The first time I met the Viren was on a salvage mission. A Clicktar convoy had gone missing in neutral space, and I was assigned to investigate, which really meant walk into a trap and figure out how to get us out alive. We dropped out of FTL near the wreck of a Clicktar transport, its hull torn open, drifting silently. The Viren were already there, a swarm of needle-shaped ships darting around like sharks that smelled blood. Clicktar protocol was simple. Fire until the target stops moving. My protocol was simpler. Don't give the target a reason to shoot you in the first place. I ordered the Clicktar to hold fire. They didn't like it, but by then they'd learned I didn't give orders unless I had a reason. We opened a channel. The Viren captain appeared on the comms screen, a wiry creature with skin like polished obsidian and eyes like burning coals. He grinned, or maybe bared his teeth, when he saw me. "Human," he said in perfect trade tongue. "I thought your kind stayed close to your cradle world." I shrugged. Got bored. The Clicktar commander beside me twitched in irritation. The Viren ignored him completely, eyes still on me. "You're the one who's been teaching the insects how to win," he said. "We've been watching." That told me 2 things. 1, the Viren had been tracking Clicktar operations, and 2, my name, or at least my species, was starting to circulate beyond Clicktar space. And that was dangerous. Dangerous. But useful. "What do you want, Captain?" I asked. He grinned wider. "To know why you're fighting for them." I didn't answer directly. Instead, I said, "Maybe someday you'll hear the real story, but not today." Then I cut the channel and ordered a retreat. The Kliktar commander was furious. "We could have destroyed them," he hissed. "No," I said. "We could have started a war you're not ready to win." What I didn't tell him was that I'd sent the Vern captain a private burst transmission before we jumped. A simple sentence. "Keep watching. The insects won't have me forever." After that, my missions changed. I still fought alongside the Kliktar, still gave them tactical wins, but I began to engineer certain situations. A weapons cache would accidentally be left unsecured during a Dreth raid. A Kliktar patrol route would change at the last minute, leaving an opening for Vern raiders to hit a supply convoy. Each mistake was subtle enough to pass as incompetence, and I played the part well. The human mercenary who didn't fully understand Kliktar protocol, who made the occasional blunder. But each blunder shifted the balance of power ever so slightly against them. It was during a campaign on the edge of Dreth territory that I decided to test just how far I could push. We were assaulting a Dreth fortress on a moon with low gravity and razor-sharp rock formations. Perfect terrain for ambushes. I convinced the Kliktar commander to split his forces into 3 assault teams, claiming it would confuse the enemy. It did more than confuse them. It isolated one of the teams completely. The Dreth annihilated them. Not one Kliktar soldier from that squad made it back. In the debrief, the commander demanded an explanation. I looked him dead in the eyes and said, "If your soldiers can't adapt, they don't deserve to survive." He didn't argue. Kliktar respect results, and we still took the fortress. But I could see the distrust in his eyes now. Good. Let him wonder if I was an asset or a liability. Let him keep me close, where I could keep cutting at his empire from within. The galaxy works on stories as much as it does on fleets and armies. Word spreads. The Dreth started telling tales of a human who fought like a demon, who could turn a Kliktar victory into a disaster without firing a shot. The Vern whispered about a human who might be worth following when the insects finally lost their grip on him. The Kliktar tried to control the narrative. They painted me as their loyal strategist, their tame predator. But the problem with predators is that they don't stay tame. The turning point came on a planet called Velos Prime, neutral territory, supposedly under the protection of the Galactic Council. The Kliktar were meeting with Dreth envoys to negotiate a ceasefire in one sector so they could focus on fighting the Vern. I wasn't supposed to be in the room, which meant, of course, I made sure I was in the room. The talks were going as expected, thinly veiled threats, posturing, promises nobody intended to keep. Then I stood up. The Kliktar delegation froze. The Dreth delegation turned to look at me. "You know this is pointless," I said. "In 2 months you'll be killing each other again, so why not save yourselves the trouble?" The Dreth leader, a tall reptilian with scales like burnished steel, narrowed his eyes. "And what would you suggest, human?" I smiled. "Simple. Stop fighting each other, and start fighting them." I jerked my head toward the Kliktar. The room went deathly still. Kliktar guards tensed. Dreth eyes gleamed, and just like that, the seed was planted. That meeting didn't end in blood, but it ended in something far more dangerous: doubt. The Dreth began to hesitate on the battlefield. Kliktar commanders began to second-guess their own human strategist. And the Viren? They started shadowing Kliktar fleets more closely, looking for their moment to strike. I could feel the web tightening, every thread leading back to me. It was risky. If the Kliktar ever put it together, I'd be dead before I could blink. But the beauty of chaos is that nobody knows where the first spark came from. The Kliktar Crowned One summoned me not long after Velos Prime. "You think I don't see what you're doing?" it asked, its voice low and dangerous. I kept my expression neutral. "I'm winning your wars." You are changing them, it hissed, and not in ways we control. I stepped closer, meeting its alien eyes without flinching. You brought a human into your war and expected not to be changed? That's your first mistake. Your second is thinking you can put me back in a cage when you're done with me. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then it stepped aside, letting me leave. But I knew, and it knew, that we'd just crossed a line we couldn't uncross. That night, I sent another message to the Verne captain. 4 words, encrypted and masked so deep, it would take a Clicktar fleet years to trace it back to me. Get ready, it's coming. Because it was. The Clicktar thought they'd seen human cunning. They thought they'd measured human brutality in the arenas. But they hadn't seen what happens when you give one of us the tools, the knowledge, and the will to burn an empire down to its bones. The galaxy didn't fear humanity yet, but it was about to. They say you can't kill an empire with a single blade. They're wrong. You just have to know where to stick it. The Clicktar's military heart wasn't their biggest fleet, or their most fortified world. It was the Provoke Nexus, a massive shipyard complex that hung in the orbit of a gas giant 3 jumps from their homeworld. Every warship larger than a patrol corvette came through Provoke at some point, for refit, for repairs, for construction. Destroy Provoke, and you didn't just hurt their fleet, you broke its spine. I'd been collecting information on Provoke for months. Guard rotations, docking schedules, security codes. Every detail mattered. And I wasn't the only one who knew the value of the Nexus. The Verne had been dreaming about hitting it for years. They just didn't have someone on the inside. Now they did. The mission they thought I was on was simple. Escort a Clicktar convoy carrying high-density plasma cores to Provoke for installation into a new dreadnought. Dangerous cargo, heavily guarded, no room for mistakes. What they didn't know was that those same plasma cores could, under the right conditions, become the biggest bombs the galaxy had ever seen. Enough to tear through the Nexus's shields and rip its dry docks apart in seconds. I'd arranged for the Viren to intercept us mid-transit. Not a full attack, just enough to force us into a tight defensive formation and drive us into a sector with a conveniently unstable binary star. The Clicktar saw it as a tactical necessity. I saw it as the perfect place to hand their precious plasma cores over to the Verne without anyone realizing it until it was too late. The handoff happened fast. While Clicktar gunners focused on Verne decoy ships, I used the chaos to slip coded clearance to a Viren stealth shuttle. They latched onto our lead transport under the cover of sensor interference from the star's magnetic fields. Less than 20 minutes later, the shuttle was gone, carrying enough explosive power to turn Provoke into space dust. We limped the rest of the way to Provoke, damaged and late, but still intact. No one suspected anything. Not even when I excused myself from the main docking bay just before the plasma cores were supposed to be unloaded. I was aboard a Clicktar corvette in low orbit over the gas giant when it happened. From that distance, Provoke was a gleaming web of steel and light, stretching across the black like some enormous spider's trap. Hundreds of ships moved in and out, their drives glowing like fireflies. Then, without warning, the heart of the complex bloomed into a sun. The explosion was silent from where I watched, but my gut still felt the shockwave. The dry docks crumpled in on themselves, massive girders spinning away into the void. Whole sections of the Nexus tore free, spinning like broken limbs. Ships docked inside never had a chance. They were ripped apart in the blast, their pieces scattering into the debris cloud. Clicktar comms exploded with panic. Orders barked, sensor readings screamed, ships scrambled to rescue survivors. But there were no survivors inside the blast radius. None. I watched it burn for a long time. And I didn't feel guilt, not for a second. The official Clicktar report called it a Dreth sabotage strike. The Dreth denied it, of course, but the Clicktar didn't believe them. They couldn't. Believing the Dreth would mean believing their own security was incompetent. So instead, they doubled down on their war effort and pulled me in even tighter. "You will help us crush them," the crowned one hissed in our next meeting. Its mandibles clicked in a rhythm I'd come to recognize as barely restrained rage. "Of course," I said. And I meant it, just not the way they thought. Because the destruction of Rovik wasn't just about weakening the Clicktar. It was about showing the rest of the galaxy that they could bleed. And word was spreading fast. 3 days after Rovik, the Vern sent me a message. No words. Just a short holovid of the Nexus collapsing into itself, overlaid with the symbol of their fleet. They were claiming the hit publicly. That was exactly what I wanted. It didn't matter that they hadn't actually done it alone. The galaxy needed to believe the Clicktar had enemies capable of cutting them to pieces. The Dreth started pushing harder along their border. The Avian Coalition launched 2 raids into Clicktar space, testing defenses that were suddenly spread too thin. And the Vern? They hit 5 more convoys in a single week, their numbers swelling as opportunists from other fringe worlds joined their ranks. Every faction was smelling blood in the water. The Clicktar tried to retaliate, but without Rovik, every loss hurt twice as much. Ship repairs took longer. New builds slowed to a crawl. They started pulling ships from less critical fronts to reinforce their core territories, which meant those fronts collapsed even faster. And through it all, I kept feeding just enough intelligence to the Viren to keep them ahead of Clicktar patrols. Not enough to expose myself, but enough to make them think I was their silent partner. They were right. It was on a long-range reconnaissance mission that I got my first taste of how the galaxy was really starting to see me. We dropped into the Algris Belt, a Dreth-controlled mining zone, to scout asteroid bases rumored to be supplying the Viren. We weren't expecting resistance. We got it anyway. A Dreth raider squadron came out of nowhere surrounding our ship. Clicktar gunners scrambled to man stations, but before they could open fire, the Dreth commander's voice came over the comms. "Is the human aboard?" The Clicktar captain froze, mandibles clicking in confusion. I stepped forward. "I'm here." There was a pause. Then the Dreth commander said, "Then we will let you pass. Our quarrel is not with you." And just like that, they broke formation and jumped away. The Clicktar crew stared at me like I'd just grown a second head. I didn't explain. Let them wonder. Let them start asking themselves the dangerous questions. Whose side is he really on? Because the truth was simple. I wasn't on anyone's side, I was on humanity's side. And humanity's best chance was to make the galaxy afraid of what we could do when pushed. The crowned one confronted me again 2 weeks after Rovik. "You are known," it said. "Even our enemies speak your name." "Good," I replied. "No," it hissed. "Not good. They do not speak it with fear of you serving us. They speak it with fear of what you will do next." I leaned forward. "Then maybe you should start fearing me too." Its eyes narrowed. I could see the calculation there, the weighing of risk and reward. It couldn't kill me. Not yet, I was still too valuable. But I'd crossed a threshold now. The Clicktar weren't just using me, they were dependent on me. And that's when a predator has the most power. That night, I sent another burst transmission to the Viren. This one was longer. Coordinates, ship schedules, and the location of a supply depot feeding the Clicktar's eastern front. The message ended with 2 words: "Make noise." The next week, the Viren hit the depot so hard it lit up half the sector. And this time, there was no one left to blame, but the Clicktar's own failure to protect themselves. The cracks were spreading. And soon, they wouldn't be cracks anymore. They'd be fault lines, and the whole empire would come down in an avalanche. The galaxy still didn't know the whole truth. Not yet. But they were starting to piece it together. The rumors of a human who played empires against each other, who turned battles into massacres and alliances into traps. And fear? Fear was starting to turn into something sharper, something that made even the toughest warlords think twice before crossing paths with me. They didn't call me by name anymore. They didn't have to. They just called me the human. And soon, that would be enough to make the whole galaxy step back. The thing about wars is they don't just kill soldiers, they kill order. By the time Rovik's ashes had cooled, the Kliktar's borders were unraveling like a frayed rope. The Dreth were pushing from the north, the Avian coalition pecking away at the east, and the Virn swarming in from every angle like jackals around a wounded lion. I'd set the pieces in motion, but now the trick was to make them work together, not for peace, not for any noble cause, but for one shared purpose. Bleed the Kliktar until there was nothing left but a memory. It started with the Virn. Their captain, the same obsidian-skinned bastard I'd met during that salvage mission months ago, met me on the hull of a half-derelict freighter drifting in a no-man's zone. We both wore mag boots, the stars cold and sharp above us, debris slowly spinning in the void. "You've cost the insects more in 3 months than we have in 10 years, he said, his voice crackling through the suit comms. "What's your endgame, human?" I looked at him, the gas giant behind us casting faint red light across his alien features. "The same as yours. Dead Kliktar." His eyes narrowed. "We've heard that before, from others. They died screaming." "Then listen to this," I said, leaning closer so our helmet visors almost touched. "You keep hitting convoys and depots. I'll make sure you know where they'll be, but you're not just going to hit them. You're going to time your strikes with the Dreth. Make them think you're working together. Force the Kliktar to fight on 2 fronts at once." He tilted his head. "And the Dreth will just play along?" "That's my problem," I said. "You just be ready." He smiled, or maybe it was just his teeth catching the light, and extended a clawed hand. I shook it. The Dreth were trickier. They were proud, disciplined, and deeply suspicious of anyone outside their species, especially a human who'd been seen in Kliktar armor. I met their war leader on the scorched surface of a captured Kliktar mining world. The air still smelled of burning chitin from the battle 2 days earlier. Dreth soldiers patrolled in tight formations, their armor gleaming in the twin suns. "You walk among insects," the war leader growled when I was brought before him. "Why should we not gut you now and be done with it?" "Because you like winning," I said. That made him pause, but only for a moment. "Explain." "You're hitting their fleets hard," I said, pacing in front of him like I was briefing a fellow officer. "But you're still fighting them the same way you did before Rovik. That's a mistake. They're desperate now. Desperation makes them dangerous." He snorted. "And you think you know how to fight them better than we do?" "I don't think," I said. "I know. I've been inside their war rooms. I've read their logistics reports. I know which fleets are running low on munitions. I know where their shipyards used to be and where they're trying to build the replacements. You want to win? You don't just hit them. You hit them when the Virn hit them too." He laughed, a harsh, rasping sound. "The scavengers? They are parasites." "Parasites that are about to become your distraction," I said. "You don't have to like them. You just have to bleed the Kliktar faster than they can bleed you. And trust me, I can make that happen." There was a long silence. Finally, he said, "If you betray us, human, you'll kill me," I said. "Get in line." The Avian coalition was the last piece. They were mercenaries at heart, bound together less by loyalty than by mutual profit. For them, it was all about cost and reward. I met their envoy aboard a trade station orbiting a dying star, the air thick with the scent of oil and scorched metal. She was tall, feathers a deep crimson, her eyes sharp and constantly moving. "You've made yourself famous," she said, her beak clicking lightly. "But fame doesn't pay for fuel or weapons." "No," I said. "But tearing down the Clicktar means you won't have to spend the next 50 years watching their fleets park outside your colonies." She tilted her head. "And you think you can do that?" "I know I can," I said. "And I'll give you the coordinates to targets worth more than any contract you've taken this year. You hit them at the same time as the Vern and the Dreth. You don't even need to fight each other. Just make the Clicktar think you are." "And when the insects are gone?" she asked. I smiled. "Then we'll see who's left standing." She gave a low, amused trill. "You are dangerous, human." "Not yet," I said, "but you'll see." By the time I left that station, the plan was in motion. The Virn, Dreth, and Avians didn't trust each other. They barely trusted me, but they trusted results. And in the first month alone, those results were catastrophic for the Clicktar. A Dreth fleet, coincidentally, arrived in a system just as the Virn were raiding a supply convoy. Clicktar forces scrambled to defend both, splitting their strength, and lost both battles. 2 weeks later, Avian mercenaries hit a refueling depot in the Outer Rim. At the same time, a Dreth strike group hammered a nearby shipyard. Clicktar intelligence assumed it was coordinated, which meant they started moving resources in clumsy, predictable ways. And every time they moved, I was there, whispering into the comms of one faction or another, giving them the timing, the coordinates, the exact moment to strike. Inside the Clicktar war rooms, the paranoia was reaching a fever pitch. Commanders accused each other of leaks. Fleet movement slowed as every jump was double-checked and every supply run rerouted. That only made them more predictable and easier to gut. The Crowned One called me in during one of their late-night cycles. "You have been effective," it said, its voice tight. "Too effective. The Dreth and Virn are acting with precision they should not possess." I shrugged. "Maybe they finally learned how to fight you." It stepped closer, the dim light glinting off its chitin. "If I discover you have had any contact with them—" "You'll kill me," I said. "You've said that before, but here's the truth. Without me, you're already dead. The only question is how long it takes." It didn't reply. It didn't have to. We both knew I was right. That's when the stories started. Not from me, not from the factions I was working with. From the Clicktar soldiers themselves. Whispers in the barracks about the human who could make whole fleets vanish. The human whose enemies let him pass unharmed. The human who was never where the enemy's fire landed. Rumors turned into superstition. Clicktar crews started calling me the shadow in the war. And that was when I knew the fear was working. The unspoken alliance wasn't about trust. It was about momentum. Every victory fed the next. Every loss made the Clicktar lash out in ways that left them even more exposed. And every time they failed to strike back effectively, the myth of the human grew. I wasn't just a strategist anymore. I was becoming a story, and stories, they last longer than empires. By the 3rd month, the Clicktar's outer colonies were in open revolt. Planets that had been under their control for generations were throwing out their governors and declaring independence. Some flew Dreth banners, some flew Vern colors, but more and more. Some flew no flag at all. When the Crowned One asked me why, I told it the truth. Because they've realized they don't need you, and that's the one thing you can't fight your way out of. It didn't answer. It just stared at me with those cold, unblinking eyes. That was fine. I wasn't speaking for its benefit anymore. I was speaking for history. Because by then the galaxy had already started to learn the truth, that humanity didn't need numbers, didn't need fleets, didn't even need allies who trusted us. We just needed one good reason to fight, and one man willing to set the galaxy on fire to make it happen. War doesn't always start with a bang. Sometimes it starts with a whisper. In this case, it was 3 whispers, one to the Virn, one to the Dreth, and one to the Avian Coalition. The words were almost identical. We move in 6 days. All fronts, no mercy. It wasn't a request. It wasn't a negotiation. By this point, they all knew better than to argue. When the humans said, "Move," they moved. The Clicktar didn't suspect a thing. They were bleeding, yes, stretched thin, paranoid and snarling at shadows, but they still believed the chaos was random. That's the thing about enemies who think they're still in control. They never look for the knife until it's already in their back. The plan was simple in theory, impossible in practice, unless you'd spent the last year worming your way into the command networks of 3 rival powers and playing them like instruments. At 0400 Standard, the Virn would hit the Clicktar's southern shipyards at Zorath Station. At 0425, the Dreth would launch a deep space strike into the Arun Corridor, the main supply artery feeding the Clicktar's central fleets. At 0450, the Avians would hit the Trinax Forward Bastion, the linchpin fortress guarding the Clicktar's eastern territories. 3 attacks, 30 minutes apart, each designed to make the Clicktar believe they were coordinated, because they were. The night before, I sat alone in my quarters aboard a Clicktar cruiser, staring at a star map. My hands rested on the edge of the console, the light from the hologram casting cold blue across my face. This wasn't about destroying the Clicktar anymore. That part was inevitable. This was about the message. When this was over, the galaxy wouldn't just remember that the Clicktar lost. They'd remember why they lost. They'd remember that one human turned the most feared military in the Orion Arm into a cautionary tale. The first strike came right on time. Virn raiders poured into Zorath Station's defense perimeter like black knives, their ships small and fast, slipping between the Clicktar's lumbering patrol cruisers. I'd given them the docking codes for 2 of the inner dry docks. By the time the Clicktar realized the returning freighters were enemy ships, half the station was on fire. Clicktar Fleet Command scrambled to respond, pulling ships from nearby sectors, exactly as planned. At 0425, the Dreth struck the Arun Corridor. The Clicktar had fortified it heavily, but I'd arranged for those fortifications to be undercrewed. A few quiet personnel transfers here, a few accidental miscommunications there, and the Dreth punched through in under 20 minutes. Supply convoys burned, freighters vented atmosphere into the void, and Clicktar escorts died screaming into their comms. Clicktar High Command was already in chaos when the Avians hit Trinax. They didn't just attack the fortress, they bypassed it entirely, hitting the command relays and communications hubs behind it. Suddenly, Clicktar forces in the east were fighting blind, their orders cut off, their chain of command splintered. From the Clicktar perspective, it was a nightmare. 3 attacks, in 3 different sectors, by 3 factions that were supposed to hate each other more than they hated the insects. From my perspective, it was perfect. I monitored the chaos from the Clicktar flagship's war room, pretending to coordinate a response while my hidden transmissions kept feeding the attackers their next targets. Every time the Clicktar tried to regroup, another blow landed before they could stabilize. By 0600, the Clicktar were in full retreat across all 3 fronts. By 0800, Zorath Station was gone, the Arun Corridor was impassable, and Trinax was under avian control. The Crowned One confronted me just before the official reports came in. "You knew," it said. Not a question, a statement. I didn't even bother to deny it. Of course I knew. Its mandibles twitched violently. "You have betrayed us." "No," I said, stepping closer. "I've ended you. There's a difference." It loomed over me, chitin plates clicking in fury. "And why human? Why betray those who fed you, armed you, gave you purpose? I laughed. You didn't give me purpose. You gave me a reminder that humanity doesn't survive by playing nice with predators. We become the predator. And when we do, I leaned in until my voice was a low growl. We make sure everyone remembers. It didn't kill me. Couldn't. Not with the Clicktar war machine falling apart in real time, and me being the only one who knew how to slow the bleeding, if I wanted to. The next week was a feeding frenzy. The Viren hit Clicktar convoys without hesitation, stripping them for parts and selling off the survivors to the highest bidder. The Dreth took entire sectors in days, planting their banners on worlds the Clicktar had held for centuries. The Avians turned their captured fortress into a mercenary hub, selling access to anyone willing to pay. The Clicktar tried to mount counterattacks, but they were too slow, too fractured. Every fleet they moved left another border exposed, and every move they made, I made sure the other factions knew about it. It wasn't war anymore. It was a hunt. That's when the real fear started to take hold. Clicktar soldiers began deserting in small numbers at first, then in entire units. Colonies surrendered without firing a shot. Merchant guilds stopped trading in Clicktar credits, calling them worthless chitin. And everywhere I went, I saw the way they looked at me. Clicktar, Dreth, Viren, Avians, civilians, mercenaries. They all looked at me the same way, like I was the one pulling the strings. Which was true. The Dreth war leader sent me a single message after the first week of the offensive. We could not have done this without you. The Vern captain sent one too. Your war is cleaner than ours, more surgical. Even the Avian envoy reached out. We may not trust you, but we respect the results. I didn't respond to any of them. They didn't need a reply. The fact that they'd sent the messages at all was enough. Proof that the myth of the human was no longer just a rumor. It was a fact. By the end of the month, the Clicktar Empire had lost a third of its territory. Their fleets were retreating toward their core worlds, their outer colonies abandoned or burned. The Galactic Council, useless and toothless as they were, issued a statement calling for peace talks. Peace talks. After decades of war, the Crowned One summoned me one last time. We will rebuild, it said. No, I told it. You won't. It stared at me, silent until I continued. You'll try. You'll pour what's left of your fleets into defending your homeworld. But the moment you do, the Vern will strike your supply lines. The Dreth will hit your border worlds. The Avians will sell your troop movements to the highest bidder. And every time you think you're safe, I smiled coldly. You'll remember that I'm still out here. Its mandibles clicked once. You are dangerous, human. I nodded. Now you're learning. The war wasn't over yet, but the Clicktar were finished. Everyone knew it. And when they were gone, the galaxy would remember one thing above all else, that it wasn't the Dreth, or the Vern, or the Avians who broke them. It was a single human who made enemies work together just long enough to tear an empire to pieces. And that's why, when I walked through the hangar that night, every pair of eyes turned to me, some with respect, some with hatred, most with fear. Fear I intended to make permanent. The Clicktar were finished. They didn't know it yet. Dying empires never do. But they were already in the part of history where the end is written, and all that's left is to play it out. Their fleets were broken, their borders gone, their name reduced to a punchline whispered in the war rooms of every species that used to fear them. And I could have stopped there. I could have walked away, disappeared into some backwater colony, lived out the rest of my life as the man who brought down the Clicktar. But that wasn't enough. Because I'd seen the galaxy. I'd seen the way they looked at humanity, weak, fragile, unimportant. The Clicktar weren't the only predators out here. They were just the loudest. If I left now, the vacuum they'd leave would fill with something worse. So I decided to make sure that whatever came next, it would think twice before ever setting foot near Earth. The first step was to take the alliance I'd forged, the Virn, the Dreth, the Avians, and turn it inward. Not against each other, against everyone. I called it the demonstration. 3 coordinated strikes, each on a target that had nothing to do with the Clicktar. Not worlds they controlled, not fleets they commanded. Neutral systems. Systems with no military value, but with populations that traded with every major faction in the Orion Arm. The point wasn't conquest, it was visibility. I wanted every comm feed, every news broadcast, every drunken spacer's tale in every cantina from here to the Rim to carry the same image: humanity in control of the storm. The Virn were the first to bite. Their captain met me on the hull of his flagship, stars spinning slowly behind us. "You want us to hit neutral ground?" he asked, suspicion thick in his voice. "Yes," I said. "Not to keep it, not to profit, just to burn it where everyone can see." His eyes narrowed. "And the point?" "The point," I said, "is to show them that humans don't need a reason to win. We don't need a war to make us dangerous. All we need is an opportunity." He grinned, sharp, hungry. "And the Dreth?" "They'll be there," I said. "So will the Avians. Trust me." Convincing the Dreth took longer. Their war leader stood in the shadow of his flagship's massive cannon, arms folded across his armored chest. "We are warriors, not butchers." "This isn't butchery," I said. "It's theater." He tilted his head, unblinking. "Explain." "When people fear you, they avoid you. When people fear what you might do, they obey you without a fight. That's the difference between winning battles and controlling the board." His eyes flickered in thought. "And you think your species can hold that control?" "No," I said. "I think my species can make it too expensive for anyone to try and take it away." The avian envoy didn't need much convincing. "Fear sells," she said simply, her feathers ruffling with amusement. "And you, human, are becoming very expensive for the galaxy to ignore." The demonstration began at dawn, standard time. The Virn hit the merchant hub at Taurus 4. Not to occupy it, not to loot it, but to burn every docking ring and leave its orbital platforms spinning dead in space. The Dreth struck Mornek Station, a neutral trade port, disabling its defenses and then vanishing before anyone could mount a response. They left nothing but their banner hanging in the central plaza, and my insignia beside it. The Avians hit a convoy of diplomatic ships en route to a council summit, boarding them, stripping them of every communication system, and leaving the diplomats adrift in space with nothing but a recorded message on loop. The human says hello. The outrage was immediate. Council channels lit up with calls for retaliation, for sanctions, for a coalition fleet to punish the offenders. But no one acted. Because to act, they'd have to agree on who to hit first: the Virn, the Dreth, the Avians, or me. And none of them wanted to take that risk, not after what happened to the Clicktar. The message was spreading. It wasn't just "don't fight the human," it was "don't even make him notice you." Inside the Clicktar's shrinking territory, the effect was worse. The demonstration hit them like a psychological airstrike. They'd thought I'd only been their enemy. Now they saw I was everyone's enemy, and that made them even more afraid. Some Clicktar commanders started sending quiet messages, offering me intelligence in exchange for being spared. Others abandoned their posts entirely, vanishing into neutral space. It was over for them, and they knew it. But now they also knew it wasn't just over for them. Anyone could be next, and that was exactly what I wanted. Fear isn't a weapon you can use once. It has to be sharpened over and over until it's the sharpest thing in the room. And now that the Clicktar were finished, I wasn't going to let it dull. So I kept pushing. Over the next month, I engineered smaller strikes, not as dramatic as the demonstration, but surgical, targeted. A Verne raid on a council munitions depot here, a Dreth ambush on a convoy there, an avian sniper taking out a planetary governor who'd been making too much noise about standing up to human intimidation. Every time, the rumors grew. Every time, my name, or just the human, carried a little more weight. The crowned one was still alive, still clinging to what was left of its empire, when it summoned me again. "You will be hunted," it said. "Not today, not tomorrow, but someday all of this will come back to you." I stepped closer, close enough to see my reflection in its black, glassy eyes. "Good," I said, "because if they're hunting me, they're not hunting Earth." It stared at me for a long time, then gave a slow, grudging nod. Not respect, not approval, just recognition. Recognition that it had finally understood what I'd been doing all along. When I left Clicktar space for the last time, I didn't go home. I didn't set course for Earth. I went deeper into the black, to the places where maps fade into guesswork and stars burn cold. Because the galaxy had learned to fear humanity. But fear fades unless you feed it. And I intended to feed it. They'd started calling me the Storm, not my name, not the human, just the Storm. Because storms don't take sides. They don't care who wins or loses. They come, they tear everything down, and then they vanish, leaving nothing but wreckage behind. That was fine by me. But I knew something the galaxy didn't. Storms fade. If you want the fear to last, you have to end with something no one can forget. Something they'll tell their children about in whispers. Something they'll use as a warning for generations. Don't provoke them. Don't give them a reason. So I gave them a reason to never forget me. The target was a council gathering, not the petty summits they held every few months. The real one. The kind they only called once in a generation, when the balance of power shifted so violently that everyone needed to be in the same room. It was to be held on Lysera Prime, a neutral jewel world that prided itself on being above the galaxy's conflicts. I'd been there once, years ago. Lush forests, oceans like polished glass, cities that looked like they'd been grown instead of built. The council called it the seat of civilization. I called it the perfect stage. Every faction would be there. Dreth, Virn, Avian Coalition, smaller powers from the Rim, merchant guilds, even what was left of the Clicktar. And Earth's representatives, of course, invited out of polite obligation. I wasn't invited. I went anyway. Getting on to Lysera Prime without being noticed wasn't hard. Everyone was so focused on keeping their ships in perfect formation for the ceremonial arrival that they didn't think to look for a single freighter using a false registry. The hard part was getting what I needed into the heart of the summit without triggering every security protocol in the book. The what was a payload, not a bomb, not in the traditional sense. That would have been too easy, too obvious. No, this was something I'd taken from a Clicktar research vault months earlier, a containment core designed to collapse matter into itself, a localized singularity generator. The Clicktar had never been able to stabilize it for use as a weapon. I had. The plan wasn't to kill them. Killing them would make martyrs. The plan was to make them understand that their survival was entirely in my hands. The summit opened with speeches. Always speeches. I moved through the service corridors beneath the great assembly dome, mag boots silent against the steel. The core was strapped to my back, sealed in a case with a biometric lock keyed to my palm. When I emerged, it was in the very center of the dome, at the foot of the circular table where the most powerful beings in the galaxy sat arguing over who was going to fill the Clicktar's place. The guards moved first. They always do. I didn't give them the chance to finish. One quick flash from the Clicktar energy staff I still carried, and the first two were down, smoking holes in their chests. The rest froze when they saw what I put on the table. A black sphere, faintly humming. "This," I said, my voice carrying in the sudden silence, "is a singularity core. You all know what it does. You all know there is nothing in this room, nothing in this system that can stop it once it activates." A ripple of alarm moved through the assembly. The Dreth war leader leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "What do you want, human?" I smiled. "Nothing. Not territory, not tribute, not your fleets. I'm here to give you one message, and one rule." I let the words hang there for a moment. The message is simple. Humanity will never be prey again. Not to the Clicktar, not to anyone. You want to fight each other? Fine. But the day any of you so much as point a fleet toward Earth, I will come back. And when I do, I won't bring one of these. I tapped the core. I'll bring 100. The avian envoy tilted her head, feathers rippling in unease. And the rule? "The rule," I said, leaning forward, "is that you never forget what happened to the Clicktar. You never forget what I did to them. And you never, ever make me prove I can do it to you." I could see it in their faces. Anger, fear, calculation. Some wanted to call my bluff. Some knew better. The Clicktar crowned one, smaller now, weakened, but still defiant, hissed. "You would destroy us all to protect your kind?" "No," I said. "I would destroy you all to make sure you understand that we don't need your protection. We only need you to fear the consequences of underestimating us." Then I picked up the core, turned, and walked out. No one stopped me. I didn't detonate it. I didn't have to. The point wasn't destruction. The point was that I could have. And that they all knew it. By the time I reached my ship, the entire planet was buzzing. Some called it terrorism. Some called it madness. Most just called it a warning. And that was exactly what I wanted. I didn't go back to Earth after that. I stayed out in the dark, moving between systems, sometimes with the Viren, sometimes with the Dreth, sometimes alone. But everywhere I went, the story followed me. Not all of it was true anymore. I'd hear versions where I'd killed the entire Clicktar High Council with my bare hands, or where I'd destroyed Rovik Station with a single shot. I never corrected them. Myths work better when they grow on their own. Years later, I heard a story from a trader who didn't even know who I was talking to. He said a Dreth commander had once ordered an entire fleet to retreat from a system because a single human freighter had jumped in. The commander never confirmed it was me. He didn't need to. That's when I knew it had worked. The galaxy didn't just remember me, it remembered the rule. The Clicktar were gone. Earth was safe. And humanity? Humanity was no longer a curiosity or a weakness. We were the storm. And storms don't ask permission.